To understand the psychology of pornography, the first thing is to identify the drive. And the drive for an individual watching pornography is to achieve sexual release as intensely as possible. Sometimes it's to lose oneself in the process. Sometimes it is to stimulate or meet an emotional addiction. For example, shame, with all of its endorphins, can be incredibly addictive, and if something has not happened on the outside recently to elicit shame, then pornography can be a vehicle for fulfilling that addiction. Anger, self-pity, fear, anxiety, all of these can be addictive states. But the drive is to move towards something that is engaging. Now, in order to move towards release and full and total engagement, it is a process of zeroing in on the inner dialogues. Now, all inner dialogues are polarities. The inner 2-year-old relating to the inner 10-year-old, the 6-month-year-old relating to the 20-year-old, the inner child relating to the projected parent. But every dynamic has a dialogue between two poles. And traditionally in trauma, when the trauma is too intense to experience as a victim, as the receiving side, the trauma survivor, the abuse survivor, will transpose their identity, dissociate from their own body, and connect with the body of their abuser. And you can see aspects in pornography where something that is clearly not pleasurable on the side of the recipient is nonetheless egged on by the recipient. You know, a woman being gangbanged violently, come on, fuck me. In order to find that pleasurable, one must dissociate with the one who's being fucked and imagine what it's like to be a violator. Imagine what it's like to have that power. And in this way, powerlessness is dissociated with and transformed into power over. And this is one form of traumatic reenactment, and by a certain mechanism, from a certain angle, mastery. I now am the powerful one who wants to hurt or abuse or dominate or control me, and that's me. And this goes on also as one might in fantasy imagine raping yourself. Imagine, if you're a woman, imagining a man raping you and imagining what it's like to be the man and getting off on that. Now, the key to understand is that all dialectics, all polarities are inextricably connected. You cannot have a speaker without a listener. You cannot have an initiator without a receiver. You cannot have a giver without a receiver. These polarities go hand in hand. If someone will not receive your gift, you cannot give your gift. If someone will not be raped, you cannot rape them. If you will not rape someone, they cannot be raped. So there is a connection, and that pattern is inside the self. Now, sexual release is at its core neutral. It's not moral, it's not good, it's not bad. It is an energy exchange. And the most intense energetic exchange is the exchange that has the most flow. So, for example, if a particular fantasy or experience produces heightened power for the initiator, the one in the masculine role, and heightened fear in the recipient, in a way where the fear leads to submission, in the fight, flight, freeze dynamic. If you come in with fight, the person will either respond with fight if they think they can win, they will run if they think they will lose, and they will freeze if neither option is available. So a fight-flight dynamic, there's flow there. Fight, not so much. Fight, freeze, somewhat. But you can see this in animals as well. You know, in that thing of don't back away. Because as soon as you turn tail and run, what you're communicating to the reptilian brain in the animal is, I think I can win, and the reptilian always attacks. The reptilian brain always attacks, be it in human beings or in animals, when it believes it can win. So when the predator, when the victim runs, there is an agreement. I think I can beat you in a fight, and you agree, that's why you're running. And so this often escalates the fight. Whereas a confident defense, you know, and for a petite woman in a dark alley, this is more a confidence of, I have a homing signal on my device, this is being live streamed, there are people at the other side of the alley, I know karate. I don't think it's a good day for you. But going back to the kind of the honing device, for someone browsing pornography, what they're looking for is a story, a dialogue that connects with an inner story that has strong emotional charge. If it has no emotional charge, then it's like a dead battery. You can connect it, it's just not going to be as arousing as a story that has high emotional charge. So what is a story with high emotional charge? Well, it's subjective, but it's definitely a story that lives within, that you have very strong feelings about. Now, what are the stories that we have strong feelings about? They are the stories that we identify with. You know, it's amazing and often quite sociopathic the way a wealthy person can walk by 100 beggars and feel absolutely no empathy. Why? And this certainly wouldn't be a basis for pornography because there's no charge. They say, these people have nothing to do with me. I'm not a poor beggar like these people. I'm a this person. Now, this same person will be deeply moved if a rich person drops their Rolex watch on the ground. And it's like, oh my gosh, oh, I feel so bad for you. Why? Because every night, you as a rich person, when you're putting down your $30,000 Rolex, worry that I'm going to drop it. So you know what it feels like. I identify with that story. Similarly, if you look amongst the homeless, they are often the most helpful to other homeless. Meaning, I've seen homeless people give each other money, share food, much more than the people who have much more than them. Why? Because they identify. I'm homeless. That's me. I identify with you. You're homeless. That's you. We're together. I know what it feels like because I'm homeless too. And so you'll see homeless people who have the least often being the most generous, whereas again, a billionaire could drive by in a Rolls Royce and not even share a glance because They don't identify with that narrative. That could never be me. So what do I have to do with it? You have dissociation. So for something to be high, when you have literally everything under the sun available on the internet in terms of pornography, your intuition, your body, your arousal levels will zero you in to the story, assuming you are willing to accept it. Meaning because there's a counter push that says, no, that has nothing to do with me. I would never rape someone. I would never watch a 12-year-old be molested or something like that. I would never do that, and so that's out. So there's a tension between what I'm willing to recognize is within me as a narrative that has charge. But within that framework of taboo and what's available, the videos that get settled on, the images that get settled on, relate to two parts within the self, the feminine part and the masculine part. Now it doesn't matter if it's lesbian, it doesn't matter if it's gay, it doesn't matter what the genders are. But sex is a phenomena of flow, which means initiation and receptivity. If every time someone makes an advance, someone else punches them in the face, that is the sex. The sex is being punched in the face. It's an energy exchange of movement and rebuttal. Now, some people will get off on that. I relate to that. When I was 5 years old, I would desperately try and connect, and every time, my mom hit me and said, stop bothering me. So that's the story that's most deeply inside me. It has the most longing, it has the most feeling. And so to watch someone else live my story engages me. And whether I engage as the initiator or the receiver or what the dynamic is, I'm going to mostly say I'm this. So you may be a man and identify with being the woman that you're watching be seduced, or imagining is seduced. So you may identify with the opposite gender. You may identify with your own gender. But the story that will capture you, that will let you lose yourself, is a story that is going on inside. Now, how can this be? Now, a great deal of pornography is misogynistic porn about men molesting girls. So you often have older men attracted to very young girls or young women. Now, this isn't always the case. There's a flip dynamic, meaning the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, if you talk with their prostitutes, will generally play out the opposite, meaning they are bossing people around all day. They feel incredibly confident. They are whipping people, esteem, etc., or, maneuvering within the politics of the company. They're at the top. And what they long for release is to step into the other side. So they'll pay a prostitute $5,000 for a night for them to dress up in a diaper, have a bottle, have the prostitute shit all over them, have the prostitute kick them, tell them what a shit they are, whip them, boss them around, handcuff them. And 6 a.m. in the morning, here's your $5,000. That was amazing. Why? Well, it's the counterpart of the story. meaning it's not just the relationship with other people is fractal in nature. So it's not just that I'm bossing around 30,000 employees as the top CEO of a chauvinistic company. That boss in me is bossing around more feminine, more passive, more receptive parts of my own psyche. And just as some of the employees feel muscled around, abused, frightened, and intimidated, some parts of me feel muscled around, frightened, and intimidated by the dominant part of me that I've elevated within the individual power structure of the identity to say, I identify with this, I'm this, because I'm in a cult that says that work is everything. And I spend most of my time at work. So the dominant identity is the identity that survives in a sociopathic work capitalist environment. So that's me. But I'm also the ones who are being violated, who are being disenfranchised, who are being humiliated. And to just, go to a prostitute and receive sexual release by continuing the imbalance of leading with the dominant identity does not create release. Instead, what creates release is to occupy safely, meaning when none of my employees are watching and when it wouldn't lose me ranking or stock options, the opposite side. To let the parts of me that feel frightened of me, that feel frightened of the dominant persona, attack me, humiliate me, kick back, to give them space for that, and to understand in that process how that part of me feels. How does this part of me feel by being bullied by this part of me? And in doing so, being able to bridge some of the gap and understanding what it's like to be under my thumb 8 hours a day and depended on for my protocols, etc., for whether your family gets fed that fall, or whether you get a job or it gets shipped overseas so that the company can save $2 a day in net profit and give a hefty dividend to the shareholders, who by definition have far more money than the employees because they've got money to invest. And so the pornography that the viewer settles on, the prostitute that the customer ends up with, the fantasy that creates the arousal and getting hard, is a representation on one side or the other of a polarity that exists deeply within. Now, what are the implications? Well, if you're a guy and love humiliating women and having power over women in your fantasy or in your pornography, then there's a feminine part of you that feels hurt and attacked and wants revenge. There's a part of you that allows people to shit all over you and that wants to come back to balance, because the release happens, it's like a battery discharge. So you build up the tension that's charging the battery, and then you release the tension through sexual release, and then you either have no more tension or you build it up again. This is one of the reasons why people living constantly in the same house together may have less tension if they don't charge up separately, and a stranger or something else may have more more tension to, if you connect here, there will be a release. And that's an alchemical phenomena. It's not, again, a moral phenomena. So you build up that tension, and then you release the tension. But a lot of the tension is already inside in fixed patterns. So if as a little boy, for example, if as a little boy I was playing, I was happy, I was smiling, and my older brother, having already had his femininity ripped away from him in a chauvinistic cult of machismo, sees the part of him that was already ripped away still on my 5-year-old face. He squirts me in the face with a squirt gun and throws sand in my pants and teases me, etc., until I weep and cry and protest, and then that satisfies him. So a sensitive, innocent part of my little boy has been humiliated and brutally beaten up, and the more I protested, the more my brother rammed sand down my pants, etc., etc. And I felt helpless. I felt overwhelmed. I felt terrified, and I felt small. And I saw that my brother enjoyed that, because that balanced out the same protocol he had received. He enjoyed giving to me what he had received. Now, I can't beat my older brother up, so that tension doesn't get released. It's not safe. The more I protest, the more my brother bullies me. So there's no way to release that tension. So it builds up. There's a small, innocent part of me that feels 5 years old. It feels terribly small. That can't speak, that can't react, and who no one protects. Well, this goes on for 2 years. It's a terrifying trauma. It's locked in the body. Well, this is not safe, so it's numbed out and dissociated from. Go on, there's other events. I fell in love with a girl at age 11. She just seemed so magical and beautiful. I just looked at her with wonder, not able to speak, not able to put it in words, in the innocence of young love. And she said, "What the fuck are you doing, dork? Stop looking at me." And suddenly I realized that my innocence is betrayed, and that it's stomped on, and that I'm actually being punished for my sensitivity. Now, this is so humiliating to an 11-year-old that I punish myself in the same way. Oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I'm so dumb. Stop being so innocent. Don't be so dumb. Look cool, right? Well, I've just taught myself how to treat 11-year-old innocence that came in that moment of first love. And I've shamed it to shove it down so that it will not be humiliated again by a brutal and sadistic 13-year-old who didn't know how to take care of her innocence and doesn't know how to take care of anyone else's. Because we're in an abuse cult where kids are brutally cruel to one another as they mirror the brutal cruelty of their relationships with the power structure of the cult. Maybe that 13-year-old had been incestuously raped by Uncle Bill. And then when she told her mother about it, her mother slapped her and said, "Don't tell anyone, you're a slut." Well, that's the kind of cruel stupidity that an emotionally and psychologically illiterate cult does intergenerationally. So her innocence was ripped away from Uncle Bill. She feels powerless and hatred towards her mother for worrying about Uncle Bill's money and her reputation more than protecting her daughter. And she's furious. She hates men. She hates authority figures, and she's not going to open up to the innocence of an 11-year-old who sees the fair maiden, the princess, the archetypal goddess, somehow in her eyes, and is speechless. She's going to trample that down like her innocence was trampled down, that believed that authority figures were able to help them. So I'm now a grown-up. We won't say an adult. But there's a lot of me that shoved stuff down. This part isn't safe. I've forgotten about this part. I don't talk about my feelings anymore, so I'm pretty numb. But I come across an image of a delicate 13-year-old girl. And some part of me wants to see her knocked down. So what's going on there? My innocence at age 11 was ripped away by a 13-year-old. And now, in the safety, see, this is the where pornography brings candor and honesty. In the safety, meaning no one will ever know that I saw this. No one will ever know what I was thinking. No one will ever know why I was thinking or when I was thinking. So there's now this magnetic pull to somehow touch and engage with a highly charged inner pattern that has never gotten resolved. There's still a wound there. Now, in the most primitive psychological levels of development, nature is just like a pendulum. You hit someone, they want to hit you back. If they can't hit you back, they find someone weaker, they hit back. And it's just an unconscious diffusion of the pattern. There's no morality, there's no kindness. We're talking about instinctive limbic and reptilian brain function. We're not dealing with culture, morality. We're just talking about people don't like being hit, makes them feel powerless. If they then hit someone, then they feel powerful. And so they're back to where they were before. And the virus is, you throw a bunch of water and sewage on me, I don't want it. So I grab it all off and I throw it, and it happens to land on the most expedient person, who happens to, of course, be nearby. This is one of the reasons spouses usually get treated worse than anyone else, is they're the closest. So when you go to throw out all the unfairness and crap at work, you throw it off your body as soon as you get home, who's there to receive it? The person closest to you, your child, your wife, etc. So you throw it off. Now you feel better, but they don't feel good, so they may throw it back. Or, the wife throws it to the oldest child throws it to the youngest child. And as long as, it's gotten off, then it feels fine. But what about these things, at age 5, you couldn't fight back to your older brother. So now there's part of me that always dreamed of being the older brother, that wanted to beat the shit out of a young kid so that I could get my dignity back, so I would not, fight. And there's another part of me that wants to, in fantasy, whatever, attack the older brother and kill him, for being so unfair. Well, this is how children feel. Well, pornography serves as kind of this Geiger counter, this center where you can find those dynamics. And you can look at the elements of the dynamic. What's going on here? Well, the victim in this porn shoot didn't do anything wrong. She's innocent, she's unprotected. There's an innocent, unprotected part in me that got harmed. And 3 guys come up behind her. It was overwhelming force, meaning the part in me that got hurt, that was sensitive and feminine and innocent, was ganged up on. I couldn't possibly win. They come up suddenly, and it's somehow very arousing, right? It's a sudden approach. It took me by surprise. You see, the most arousing, engaged, I lose myself in the image, the fantasy, the pornography, and the most immediate release comes when the pornography, in a metaphorical way, obviously, since, if you're a boy, most porn is watched by men or boys in men's body, in many cases. You weren't a 20-year-old girl picked up by hitchhikers, but I was lied to, and I was overwhelmed, and I don't get off. I don't feel satisfied when they're polite to her and say, "Would you enjoy a gangbang, and we'll do this, and we'll find a nice day for you"? No, that's not what I want. I wanted to shove a sock in her mouth so she can't speak. There's some helpless part in me that had a gag order. My brother said he'd kill my cat if I told Mom and Dad what he did. I want to see the sock shoved in. And then when I said, "Please, you're hurting me, Mom and Dad, stop hitting me," they hit me harder. That's what I want to do. I want to fuck this bitch. I don't want anything. That's not I want to feel what it's like to completely ignore another human being, as I felt completely and utterly ignored. You see, there's always a counterpoint. And if we're identifying with the abuser in this scenario, in the fantasy, that's the medicine. That's the medicine. The fantasy is the medicine for the unreleased charge, which is the counterpoint to the medicine. So if my favorite porn is, I like to see a cave of chained 10-year-olds, or 10 women who have to be my slave, whatever it is. So this is the medicine, right? This is the antithesis of the wound. I want it to be cold and hard, and I want it to be clear. It's all about me. So that's the medicine. So what's the wound? The wound is the part in the self where that was done to in another shape, usually in another shape. You weren't taken into a cave as a 5-year-old and lined up with other 5-year-olds and whipped by some dominatrix woman. But you might have been there with your siblings screaming and crying and saying, "I didn't do it." And your mom said, "I don't care whether you did it or not. You're all going to be hit. That'll teach you a lesson." So we're all alone. There's a bunch of 5-year-olds. I care for my sister. I'm afraid it terrifies me when she gets hurt. Terrifies me when my brother gets hurt. Terrifies me when I get hurt. And Mom says she's never coming back. And I need her. Even if she's cruel to me, I need her. Well, I want a fucking woman who I kick around, beat, grab her head and throw her on my penis. I want to kick her away, and I want her to beg that I don't leave her. That's what I want. That's the medicine for the psychological wound. The deeper identification is with the wound. The fantasy is the redress of the wound, which is the opposite, which in basic psychological terms is just transposing. So this is when the parent, who was humiliated and beaten and incestuously abused by their parent, does the same to their parent and feels sane again. Now the balance has been restored. My father yelled the shit out of me. I always felt so unworthy. Now I yell the shit out of my son, and he feels unworthy, and I get it. And I realize it's not personal, it's just part of, because the charge is released. I was given the shit, I've thrown it on someone else, now I'm free. Except, of course, these things can go around and I can remember again, or these things can become loops where even after I discharge the wound, I remember, put it all back together, because that's my identity. I am the wounded one. So I have to remember things that affirm my identity, otherwise I don't know who I am, because I've identified with the wound. But what is the wound? The wound is some part of the psyche that got the feeling that I'm trying to seek as I identify with the male in the drama, directing towards the female in the drama. The one I'm identifying with, like, I don't rape people, I would never do that. But I really enjoy watching this guy be rough on, I'm a sensitive guy. I would never, have to be very polite. Would you mind if I touch your breast? Is this, what are your boundaries? But, boy, it's nice to watch some guy fuck that woman. Just fuck her. It's like, yes. I wish it would be so medicinal if I could do that. It's like, how would I live with myself and stuff? But this is the benefit of the pornography and the world of fantasy, is it teaches us what our wound is. Meaning, whatever it is that we want to do, like if we're heterosexual, whatever it is that we want to do to women in fantasy and in porn is the opposite of what was done to our feminine side. Or is, I should actually say, the same. It's going from being the victim of that to the perpetrator. Now, women are incredibly cruel and sadistic to the feminine side in boys. You have the sadistic, chauvinistic woman who has no interest in the nice guy. Fuck you. I'm not going to waste my time. You're not a man. I want a man who will rape me, be 6 foot 4 inches tall with big muscles, not take no for an answer. That's the guy who's going to get my pussy. And he's going to pound that pussy. You're a wimp. You can never do it. Right? So you have the chauvinistic woman who dissociates and identifies with the man who will dominate her, who she believes is better than her, just like Dad was when he beat her. So, or molested her. So you have these dynamics going on in the cult. And pornography can identify, if you will find the piece of porn that is most satisfying without any inhibitions, and then you will look at who you are identifying with, because you're going to pick either the male or the other male or the female, or you're going to pick the dominant or the submissive side in general. Most porn has a dominant and a submissive. It can vary by gender, but there's very little porn of loving husbands and wives very tenderly and kindly and gently cuddling together and then moving into a little sex and then talking about it afterwards. It's like, I don't want that. I want something violent, taboo. So we're talking with something that's taboo and secret now. I want it to be secret. So we're talking about a secret. Someone hurt you, for example, and they said, don't tell anyone about this. This is our little secret. Don't tell your mother. She'll break her heart, whatever. There has to be, that hurt me. I felt this overwhelming feeling. I didn't know what to do, so I put it aside. But that feeling is there and needs to be discharged. Now, unconscious reenaction does not necessarily, particularly if the identity stays the same, you just remember it again, build up a new charge, and it has to be done all over again. But there is no satisfying pornography without both sides of the story having everything to do with the viewer. And this is a really important thing to understand in the way that shame is discharged often from men to women. Yeah, you're a loose bitch. I fucked you because I felt like it. I don't care about you at all. You're a piece of garbage. I just fuck you whenever I want to. But me, I'm a really important person. What kind of valuable person chooses, out of all the thoughts in the universe, to associate with garbage? A really valuable person associates with a really valuable person. What's the truth? You don't think you're valuable at all. You feel like a complete piece of shit. And you can't escape the feeling. It's too deep. It was hammered in too many times, and you agreed to take on dad's shit and mom's shame. I feel terrible. My secret is I'm worthless. How do I compensate? I frantically make as much money as possible. I overwork. I wear Gucci crap. I do all these things to look good, to hide this. And when I could imagine a loving fantasy, a healing fantasy, a playful fantasy, when I could actually not be watching porn and be with a real human being who I love and care about, far more satisfying, obviously. No. I want to find some woman and imagine fucking her and throwing her in the gutter and saying, get out of here. And I'm going to try and give some of this horrible worthlessness that I feel to her in the process. And hopefully she'll carry a bit of it. And if she'll behave stunned and worthless, then I can convince myself I got rid of it, right? It's like my worthlessness is now her worthlessness. But that's the thing, it's my worthlessness. Valuable people treat themselves and others valuably and associate with other valuable people. People who are worthless say, oh no, I'd never want to do any of that. I want to find some maid who's scared and in my employment and, scrubbing the floors. That's who I want to have sex with. Because maybe she'll believe that I'm really important, and then I'll be able to do it. You see, so it's always communicating. The person you choose to have sex with, in person or in pornography, is always telling you who you are. It's may or may not be about them, but it's about you. And so that's really one of the few positive aspects of a rich imagination, fantasy, and pornography, is you can learn about the buried, undischarged parts of your own mind and your own body, and discover who those parts think they are. Because we are always in a dynamic sexuality, connecting two polarities within the self that the other person and their body is just a placeholder for. And that's what makes good chemistry. someone who reminds us of a part of ourselves that we've banished, and so we say that has nothing to do with me, or that we secretly believe we are. And thus, it is intelligent, whether in a relationship of pornography or a relationship of prostitution or a relationship of friendship and a relationship of marriage, it is intelligent to look at our wife, to look at our lover, and discover the counterpoint, the part in us that is exactly like them. Now, if we hate our wife, I'm so disgusted with her. Oh, she's so dumb. Well, then we're in a relationship with a part of ourselves that was treated with disgust, that was made out to be stupid, that we agreed and tried to disown, that we hate when it shows up, but it's us. And nothing can be more convincing than that we keep meeting ourselves. And one of the few ways to show that your partner has absolutely nothing to do with her, with you, that you're not connected, you don't feel sexually aroused around her or towards her, you don't have any care about her, you don't have any jealousy, you have almost no charge about her, but you're highly charged around other people. Oh, I really want to have sex with that woman. My wife, I've never really cared about having sex with my wife, but I really want to have sex with this person. Well, then you might look at, well, why have you protected yourself from connecting with your own feelings by marrying someone you're not attracted to, you have no feelings about, there's no charge around? But if you have strong sexual feelings towards someone, you also have strong charges that discharges two parts of you connect in that relationship. And this is perhaps the best argument for marrying someone that you have a strong sexual charge around, because what it probably means if you don't is your issues, your narratives are too different for you to relate. You know, if you were an orphan as a 5-year-old and you're now maybe a 30-year-old man and you meet an 18-year-old who was an orphan, you're immediately going to populate all your feelings with all your projections of what it was like when you were an orphan and how could you help, and it's going to be incredibly meaningful. But if you relate to a traditional person who marries a Christian woman, then the fact that this is an orphan 18-year has nothing to do with you. You don't feel anything. That's somebody else's his partner. So the partner we end up with is the partner that occupies often the counterpoint, which is, you know, if I'm the smart one and I'm leading with all my smartness, then maybe I'll marry someone who looks like an idiot in public. And then I'll shame them in public like the part of me was shamed in public that convinced me to try and be so smart. And the dynamic continues.